Welcome to Camp Code, the podcast where we explore what it really takes to build strong staff, thoughtful leaders, and meaningful camp experiences. Today, we're talking about something every camp does, but not every camp does well. Building a leadership training schedule that actually prepares people for the real work of camp. Join us as we learn from Shoshi Rothschild, founder and principal of Intent Consulting and Facilitation, how best to set up the most effective staff training schedule. Running camp should be about people, not paperwork. UltraCamp helps you manage staff, registration, and communication in one place, so you spend less time on tasks and more on camp. Find out more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have been podcasting for 11 seasons. This is now number 12, and we just knew we needed to continue. Because just like people grow and change, so does our industry. So here we are, ready to discuss new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those doing the work, and new ideas to help us all do our jobs better. Our commitment to intentional leadership training just grows stronger every year. So welcome everybody to another episode of Camp Code. I'm really excited for today's topic. I got to attend Shoshi's session at the OCA last month, and it was brilliant. So we definitely wanted to have her on the show. But as always, before we get to the good discussion part, we're going to begin with introductions. So Gabrielle, could you go first, please?
Hey everyone, my name is Gabz. My pronouns are she, her, elle, and I work at Camp Waro. At Camp Waro, we try to create a positive environment for girls and gender minorities, and we try to do that in English and French. And I am also very excited to have Shoshi here today.
Thanks. All right, Shoshi, tell us a little bit about you, please.
Well, my name is Shoshi Rothschild. My pronouns are she, her. I am thrilled to be here today on the Camp Code podcast. I am a former camp professional. I was the associate director of a summer camp based out of Montreal, Canada, which is where I am recording from today. I was the associate director there for 9 years. And now I have my own consulting practice where I work with camps, among other types of organizations, to ensure a positive staff experience and that our staff are happy and healthy and feel valued, that they want to keep coming back to camp year after year.
See, now you see all of a sudden why we want her on the show, right? Like already, she's in. Okay. And I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are also she, her. I'm a camp consultant and trainer, and I'm an author who eats, sleeps, and drinks staff training. I see opportunities everywhere I go. I write them down, and I keep them for next season's trainings and our podcast. Honestly, it kind of gets annoying after a while. But anyway, all right. So let's be honest. Too often training schedules feel packed, but not purposeful. We rush to cover information, policies, logistics, and then we wonder why staff still feel unprepared when campers arrive. A great training schedule is not just a checklist of sessions. It's a sequence. It builds confidence before responsibility and practice before performance. So we're excited to learn from somebody who spent years helping camps design training experiences that truly develop leaders, not just deliver information. And we are joined, as you know, by one of our co-members of the Women in Camp Summit. So this is a mini reunion of sorts for the three of us. So it's so nice to be together again and talking about something different, but still camp. So we're going to dig into how you can design a schedule that sets your staff and your summer up for success. So Shoshi, welcome. We are so glad that you're here to help us rethink how we build leadership training from the ground up. And since you are an expert on staff training, Gab and I would really love to focus on practical strategies, philosophies, actionable tips that our audience of camp directors and trainers can apply this summer. So we have questions. So I'm going to start things off. So we've been looking forward to this because staff training can make or break a summer, but so many camps struggle to get the schedule right. So Shoshi, you have worked with dozens of camps on this. Can you start by telling us how you define great staff training? What does that look like in practice?
Well, I like the way you phrase that question, Beth, because, how do I define it? What does it look like in practice? I think those could be two different answers. So in terms of how do I define it, I mean, I define a positive staff training experience as one where staff finish off with their training experience feeling motivated, excited, and empowered, and also that they have the skills they need in order to successfully do their job, that they understand exactly what is expected of them throughout the course of the summer when it comes to their job, but also that they feel energized. And I think what happens, unfortunately, so often is that by the end of staff training week, maybe we've tried to relay all the proper information to them, but they're exhausted and they feel overwhelmed. And so I think if we focus on the energized, empowered, motivated, as opposed to just packing in as much information as possible, that's one of the most important things. And then to answer the second part of your question of what does that look like, I love to see staff training where there are staff participating in shared experiences that end up helping them develop the skills they need to be successful in a role, but that they are learning through doing. So they are learning through action, through experience, through going through different exercises on their own and as part of a team in order to learn the skills that they need to succeed. And we also know that shared experiences really builds trust and it helps to build relationships. So the more learning we can do through action together, not only are your staff going to feel prepared and have the training they need, but they also will have had a lot of time to build relationships and trust with the team that they're working with this summer. And that to me is one of the most important parts of staff training as well. It's not just about the skills, it's also about creating a really positive team environment and helping staff to build relationships with their co-staff, with any other staff member as much as possible throughout the course of their training.
So for those of you who are only listening and not watching on YouTube, Gab is furiously writing, first of all, for her recap, but also she's got her fist in the air and she's pumping it away. She's excited.
It's just so good because I think it's what Beth and I talk about often. But I think what I'm excited about, we're going to get to it, is the practicality of this, because I don't want new camp directors and I'll shout out to the oldies being like, I want that, but how? Like, there's so much to do. So I'm going to pass it back to Beth, but I'm already so excited.
So I would like to know, because this might help answer that question, Gab, but what are the biggest mistakes that you see camps make when they're designing that staff training schedule?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to be very intentional about the scheduling. So the actual scheduling of what does the day-to-day look like, what does the whole, whether you're doing 2 days, 5 days a week, what does the week look like? How does that play out? And being really intentional about certain things. So first of all, timing of scheduling. It is known that people tend to be sleepier in the afternoon and especially right after a meal. So it is really, really important to really think thoughtfully and intentionally about what you're scheduling in that time period. If it is a kind of forward learning lecture style, there is a chance that your staff members are going to fall asleep. So that would be a great time to do a great team building exercise, something that involves moving around, running around, laughing, having fun, building shared experiences, building trust. That's a really great session to put immediately after lunch or in the afternoon when people are tired. Also thinking about the types of sessions that you're running back to back and what you're experiencing in a day. Is this day really heavy for staff? Did we do a lot of really intense, safety protocols and missing campers and emergency and healthcare and all of that? That could be a lot for people to digest in one day. So I think it's really important to spread that out and also be really intentional about the types of sessions that you're building. I always say to the camps I work with, it is really important that in each day of your staff training, that you make sure there are experiential workshops. So where staff learn through doing, that there is time for them to bond and create memories and experiences with one another, that there's time for them to rest, that there's time for them to have fun. It's not just throw in one staff rec one evening of a 5-day training. There should be something every day that's focused on the staff experience. And so really just kind of looking holistically at what are all of the things you need to do? What are all of the sessions that you want to do? And how are the needs of staff and the experience of staff being woven into this so we can make sure that at the end of the day, the staff experience comes first? Because you can run as many sessions as you want and pack the staff full of all of this information, but if they're not paying attention, they're not listening, and if they are exhausted, it's not going to be worth it. So it really is important to prioritize the staff experience and how they're going through each day, each session, each week, whatever time period that you're working with, really thinking intentionally about how are they going to be experiencing this and how can I make this easy for them to digest this information and make sure they're still having a good time.
It reminds me, my very first year of directing, I worked for a board and I had my evaluation at the end of the summer. And the board member said to me, which was a trick question, but she said, "Who are the most important people at camp?" And I know she was waiting for me to say campers. And I said staff. And she just looked at me and she she leaned in and went, "You're supposed to say the campers." It's like, well, why I say staff, exactly that, because if
Yeah.
you're well trained, if you've thought them through that, you've built that trust and relationship with them during training, and then your campers will, by default, have a better, safer, more creative, amazing experience. So got to
Exactly.
put the staff number one.
And I'm glad you said that, Beth. I always say that whenever I'm speaking, because I always talk about the staff experience. And I always say this might be controversial, but I think, people think the most important constituents of a camp are the campers. I always believe that it's staff. And you can have a camp that is packed full of campers. Every single bed could be full. But if you don't have staff that are well trained and that are excited to be in their roles and that are taking care of those kids, it actually doesn't matter how many campers you have because they're not going to have a good experience. So I'm right there with you.
And there'll be
I
less
believe
in the
that too.
bunks next year.
100%. Yeah.
They really are one and the same, aren't they? We are treating staff members the way we want them to treat the campers, and only staff members that feel cared for, can care for. I mean, I'm not saying that if you're not cared for, you're not going to care, but what I'm saying is that
It's a sticker, Gab's a sticker.
it's a sticker. You're right. We need so many stickers. Shoshi. But this is I like the controversial piece, but it connects back to what the bottom line always wants to connect back to, which is
Our
the
purpose,
campers. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our amazing sponsor, and we'll be back with the how-tos in just a moment. For Camp Code listeners, unlock Ultra Camp's operations checklist for new directors, a free download to help you prepare for a smooth season. Find it at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Running camp comes with countless moving parts. UltraCamp helps you stay on top of them. Organize activities and daily schedules, manage wait lists and cabin assignments, automate billing and payments, centralize all camper and staff info in one place. With UltraCamp, camp operations run smoother, so directors can lead with confidence. Book your free customized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. And we are back. I'm going to turn this over to Gab because she's got some questions.
Well, I do. I have so many questions, but Beth has limited me to a couple, so I'm going to go with some of the
For
favorites.
now, you'll get a chance to ask some more.
So it's funny because I just did my research of my first aid 2-day classic course, which we've all can teach by now. And I am always curious about the process for deciding what order of sessions during the training week, what order do you pick when you look at sessions? Because that is such, when I was looking at this first aid coordinator, he was actually really, really skilled on how he was weaving through the information. But where do you start? So if you're giving advice to a camp director, where would you tell them to start with deciding what order your sessions to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually think there's a few different ways that you can go about doing it. And the two ways that I like to recommend the most are, one is to start with the individual and work out. And two would be to start with the community and work in, and to build your schedule around either of those. So if we're starting with the individual and working out, it would mean that the first few sessions of your staff training would really be focusing on people understanding who they are as a leader, what their strengths and challenges are, how they want to bring their strengths to their role this summer, how they can help use the support from the people around them to help them overcome their challenges, and really kind of starting to understand their role, not just as a staff member, but as a leader, and what does that look like for them. And then from there, once we've taken time to help them understand leadership and their own values and how they tie into the values of the camp, because that's really where we start to get into the culture. And I'm such an organizational culture nerd, and I think it's so important in staff training that we emphasize the importance of the camp culture, but also the culture within the staff team. So if we start looking at who we are, what we can contribute, like where our values match those of the camps, where there might be gaps, And then you start to work outward. So now I've understood myself, who are the people I'm working with directly. How am I going to use those strengths and challenges to complement my co-staff? And we're going to start to build our little community with, if you're on an activity area or in a bunk, with that group of people that you're working with the most often. And then we're going to move out and out and out until we are looking at the camp as a whole. So that's one approach. The other approach would be to work the other way. So we start with community. You welcome the staff and you explain to them, you are all part of something bigger. This is our camp. This is our community. This is our culture. And you start really big and then you start to narrow it down. So you would start maybe with the trainings that focus on camp culture, camp traditions. Here are the things everyone needs to know about our camp. And then you start narrowing it down. So then you say, okay, now if you're working as if you are a cabin counselor or if you're an activity specialist, we're going to go into your specific training. We're going to talk about camper care, big picture, and then we're going to narrow it in. Okay, you are with 12 and 13-year-olds. Let's talk about what camper care looks like for that. You are, on sailing. Let's talk about like day-to-day scheduling, activity planning, what that looks like. And then you narrow it in even further and you end with a really personal, how do I interpret everything I've just learned this week? What does that mean to who I am as a leader? Mm-hmm. And then I always love to end with goal setting. I think it's so, so important for staff members to be setting goals for themselves, both personally and professionally, and to have those goals match with how they're going to be evaluated throughout the summer. So to always end your staff training or weave it in somewhere towards the end, show them their evaluation form and what that's going to look like, explain to them how they're going to be evaluated, what they're going to be evaluated on, and then say to them, what are your goals? What do you want to work on this summer? How can we evaluate you on something that's important to you? So those are the two ways that I would suggest setting it up. In terms of trying to plot in all those other trainings, I don't know if we're going to get there, but I really like to encourage camp leadership teams to make a list of all of the sessions that the mandatory, like the trainings, the things you have to do. And then also to reflect on the previous summer and identify some challenges they had on the staff team that summer and to prioritize designing and bringing in sessions that address those specific challenges that also go in the we have to category. So let's say, last summer, you noticed that there was your staff, this is something that's come up a lot lately, that your staff aren't taking initiative in problem solving.
Right.
They're seeing a problem and they're either walking by it, not doing anything about it, or they're saying, I don't know how to fix that. Who can help me? So I'm getting a lot of requests on how do we train our staff to better identify and solve problems on their own. If that's a big issue, that's a topic you need to cover this year. So write it down and put it in the must-haves. And then once you have all of your sessions and topics laid out, that's when you can start to plot them in to see, okay, which one fits into the individual, which one fits into bigger community. Do all the staff need to hear this or just a handful of them? And you can start kind of piecing it together that way.
I love that. And what I'm hearing you say is that in all cases, no matter what, we have to focus on the individual and we have to focus on the community. You can't be part of a community without being acknowledged as an individual, that you just have to feel seen, but you can't only focus on the community. You have to help staff members see the big picture, which is basically the people that they're working with and building those relationships. So I love that focus and the must-haves and adjusting every year, I think is wonderful. I think like one of the things that comes up for Beth and I is with camp directors is we have so much information. We know we have to do interactive type sessions or experiential sessions, something that you talked about at the beginning of the podcast. What advice do you have for camp directors in balancing that theoretical versus trial and error? Because we know that moving and doing is almost like an arrow into your knowledge part of your brain in a positive, non-harmful way. So what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Beth heard me talk about this when I spoke at OCA a couple of weeks ago. Any session, I think it's really important to challenge yourself, your leadership team, whoever's working on staff training, to really think outside the box when it comes to how can we present this information. Any session that can possibly be done through an experience is always going to hit harder than a camp director standing up in front of a room full of staff members and speaking for, an hour, 45 minutes. So I like to use the example of the camp that I used to work at. We would go through a day in the life and everyone had their staff manuals and we would sit down and we would explain, what their roles and responsibilities are at breakfast and how we do meds and mail and the line for the tech shop and all those things. And it was really boring and no one was listening and no one was paying attention. But it was really important information, right? The staff need to know where they are supposed to be at what time of day and what their responsibilities are. So we had a program director that came to us one year and he said, no one's listening. It's so boring. It's a waste of time. I want to put together, at my camp, we called it a GTR, giant team relay. And he said, I want to put together a GTR that takes staff all around camp. And as they're running around camp in this team relay, they are doing different things at different stations that are reflective of what we expect them to do there during the day. So the race followed a typical day. It started with wake up, it went to breakfast, to med call, all the things along the way. And there were staff stationed at each place and they were running around and they were doing kind of silly examples of what they really should be doing. And what happened? A, the staff understood where they were supposed to be at what time of day and what they were supposed to do there. B, they had a hilarious time. They were laughing, they were bonding, they were building trust with one another, they were sharing in experiences, creating inside jokes. So that is amazing in terms of team building. And it was, instead of, 40 minutes of them sitting on an auditorium floor with like that really sad one fan spinning and it's really hot out, they were enjoying the outdoors. They were having fun. They were running around and they got to spend 45 minutes outdoors and having a good time with that. So I think that's a really good example. And as much as you can do that for anything, say to each other, how can we make this more fun? How can we make this more interactive? Is there any way? And when there absolutely isn't, that's when, okay, so you do, the 45-minute frontal facing lecture. But I think the goal is to have as few of them as possible. If you can keep it to one a day, that would be amazing.
That is a wonderful goal. One a day is a great goal. And Soshi, you're not saying every single session is a running game. You're saying absolutely put in the theoretical, but then what can you do off of that? I find myself with my leadership team members giving them the information and saying, okay, how can we practice this? How can this, and the word fun, I think, is such a great piece. Like, are we going to be laughing while we're doing this? What kind of feedback can we do afterwards? So, but listen, the study team, if you're still not convinced, the studies are out. This is how you're going to get people to absorb the information you want them to absorb. And at the very least, they're building friendships and they need that to do their job well during the summer. So that long relay is so great. We do something similar and we call it Camp in an Hour, and they have to do something similar. Beth, I know you have a couple of burning questions. Do you want to take it away?
Do. Well, first of all, just to wrap up that last piece, you had a slide during your OCA presentation that was like a grid, and you were trying to move people from lecture style over. Can you just sort of give the titles of the grid so that people can kind of think about that? Because I thought that was really helpful.
Yes. So I like to kind of separate workshop session types into really 4 categories. So the first is interactive. So these are experiential, hands-on, facilitated workshop, but they encourage participants to learn by doing. So this is kind of what we've been talking about, what Gab was just speaking about. The second is peer facilitated, and that's when you will divide your staff members into small groups, maybe even in pairs, and they're kind of self-facilitated, self-managed small groups, or they're facilitated by a member of the staff team. Recreational are really just pure fun. And I say pure fun, they also, do a lot in terms of building trust, team building, developing relationships, but really just fun group activities that bring the group together, that create shared experiences and lead to better team dynamics. And then the final one is lecture. So that is the frontal facing somebody, an educator who's typically standing at the front of a room and is speaking for the majority of the session. So I always say that anything that you can possibly move from lecture to interactive or peer facilitated, that is the goal. Like I said before, as few lecture-based workshop sessions as possible is really ideal with, the goal of one a day. I think that's kind of a really good place to work from. And if you can take sessions that in the past have been lecture and find ways to turn them either into interactive or peer facilitated, incredible. Even more incredible is if you can take the interactive or peer facilitated sessions and try to turn them into recreational. So how do we, let's say, have, the camp that I was at, there was one day during staff week where we always did like a beach party, and we'd have all the staff down at the beach, and it was, open lake, and they could go swimming and play beach volleyball and use all the boats and everything like that. how can we take that and make it a little bit more intentional? So they're still doing exactly everything that they were doing before, but maybe there's a piece of learning that gets brought in. Maybe there are some of our camp values that get woven into some of the activities that we do while on the beach. So they're still having a really fun time, but we're also checking off our list, or maybe we're putting them in buddies and we're making them do buddy call like they would if they were at General Swim. So we're checking something off our list. They now know how General Swim works. They now know how to do the buddy call, but they've also just had a really fun time swimming together. And so we can check off the recreational and doing the overview of how free swim or general swim works. So those are the categories, Beth, that I was talking about at OCA. And yeah, like I said, as much as we can move away from lecture and move into interactive, peer facilitated or recreational, the better experience it's going to be for the staff.
Perfect. I thought that was just brilliant. When I saw it on the
Thank you.
screen, I was like, yep, that's a great visual to move stuff over. Okay, one more question before I pass it back to Gab. How do you design sessions to build confidence while not overwhelming these young people who have come to work for you for the summer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important. Whenever I'm designing a session, I always start with the goals. Like what do we want the outcomes of this session to be? What do we want the staff members to walk away with? So what are the skills that we want them to learn? What is it that we want them to understand? And really focus on that specifically. I find sometimes we try to pack too much in, or when we're too broad, it becomes very overwhelming. So really narrow in on specific goals, specific skills, and then share that with the staff members at the beginning of the session. So in this session, we're going to talk about dealing with difficult conversations, let's say. And here's why we're talking about it. And here is what we are hoping that you gain from this session. You go through the session, really, again, focusing on those outcomes, focusing on those really, really specific points. And then towards the end of the session, when we're doing a debrief, go back to what you shared with them at the beginning and check in with them and say, the goal of this workshop was to give you the skills and the confidence you need to have difficult conversations with your co-staff when you are facing conflict. Let's say, here is how we did that today. So we did this by putting you into pairs. We talked you through an exercise in appreciative inquiry. We talked you through different communication skills. How do you feel now? And how might you use these skills real time in dealing with a conflict with your co-staff? And have them respond. I think sometimes having other staff members explain how they would use that, how that translates to real life, is going to help the staff members who haven't gotten there yet, better understand how they can also use that. I think it's really important to call on participation from the group as much as possible and have them contribute, because the more other people see how their co-staff might use these techniques in real life, the better they're going to understand how they can do it themselves. And I think just constantly checking with staff to make sure, like, are you getting out of this what we wanted you to get out of this? Do you understand how to use these skills that we just taught you? And if not, let's go back, let's review, let's course correct, and try to figure out how we can make you feel really, really confident by the end of the session.
Great. Gabrielle, I pass it to you.
Yay. In a perfect world, everybody would come to camp with the same level of knowledge at the same time, all on the same bus.
Wait, that doesn't happen?
Apparently not.
Oh.
So how do we, we have to bend for our staff. Sometimes we have to bend for the fact that they're going to come a little bit late due to school, due to whatever reason. We do also have staff members that have been with us 3, 4, 5 years. They might not be able to stand up and lead a flawless session, but they could definitely, and maybe some of them could, but they know what they're doing when it comes to like dealing with campers and tough situations or standing up in front of, large crowds. So how do you adapt when staff arrive at different skill levels or different experiences or even different times?
Yeah, this one, it's tough. And like you
Solve
said,
all our problems, Shoshi, solve it.
Everyone comes to camp on day 1 and be needing to learn the same things, and everybody would be done by day 6 and it would be wonderful. But like you said, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So again, I really see this. I'm a visual learner, so you'll see me use my hands a lot, but this is really one big puzzle. And so, I think that it is important to, and again, because I'm visual, I would probably map this out using a bunch of Post-its. Often they would probably be color coordinated. I always have a bunch of different colors at my desk. And think about, okay, in terms of, our accreditation or certifications, what are the things that people absolutely cannot miss? So if I'm doing first aid training and I know that every single one of my staff members needs to do first aid training, that's a non-negotiable, right? And then I would start to look at, like you said, Gabs, who are the returners that may already know some of these things? Who are the new staff, and prioritize it from there. But I also think it's really important. There's two things I really want to mention here. The first is I think we have a tendency as camp directors to prioritize all of the lecture style frontal learning session, because those are the ones that often are the really important ones. So the safety protocols, let's say. It is really important that every single one of our staff members knows how to deal with, a missing camper. So for the missing camper drill, they have to be there. But then what ends up happening is that if there is, let's say, only 1 or 2 days where every single staff member is there, that's when we go back to what I was talking about before with intentional scheduling, where you've packed all the less fun sessions, the more intense sessions, into 2 days. I think it's really important that we prioritize team building and camp culture as much as we prioritize safety protocols. Because if somebody is coming to camp and all they've heard are the safety protocols and they haven't had time to bond with their co-staff and they haven't had time to get an understanding of what the culture of the camp is and what our values are, then yes, they will know what to do when, hopefully they would never encounter an emergency situation. But if they do, they would know what to do. But they're not going to fit into the greater community of camp, and they're not going to have the time and experience that they need in order to feel safe and comfortable and welcome here. So I think it's really important that we also make sure we are prioritizing those sessions as well. And now I know people are going to say to me, well, we can't do everything. How are we going to do this? So look at your returning staff. How can you use them? And not just, and I don't mean they should be running a session, but, when do we really need them to be part of this? And when do we maybe not need them as much? What is information we can share with them and then have them share to others? It also helps to empower our returning staff and to make sure they don't get bored in sessions that they find are repetitive. So again, what I would do personally is I would make a color coordinated list of Post-it notes with each individual session on it. You have your absolutely all staff must attend. And then you have your, different, this is for activity leaders, this is for cabin counselors, whatever different sections you have all the sessions written down, and start to piece it out based on when your staff are going to be there and when some will be missing. What can be missed? What can be retaught by someone else at a later date? Like you can use your senior staff to, let's say there's a session on camper care and you have some staff that are missing it. Can the senior staff then do that another night before bed with the people that missed it, or at another time? Like a lunch and learn is a great way to squeeze in sessions that people might have missed, kind of condense. You're going to, all of the first year staff that missed this session on camper care are going to have lunch with this section ahead, and we're going to talk about the important things that you missed. But again, also prioritize that they get a chance to spend time with their community, with their co-staff, with their, their co-counselors, so that they get to experience the fun parts of camp, the magical parts of camp, build those relationships, and they're not just coming in for the intense, security and safety protocols. And I will say it's never going to be perfect. It can't be. I think that the ultimate goal is that every single one of your staff members finishes staff training feeling as though they have been prepared. They're prepared to do the role that they signed up to do. They understand the role they signed up to do, and they feel like they have the support system and a team around them to help them succeed in that. And those are the three most important goals. So whatever you can do to make sure that you've touched each of those three goals, or that every single staff member has had a chance to kind of touch each of those three goals, I think that's kind of best case that you can best case scenario out of a tough situation.
Yeah, I love that. That's my hope. I also tell my staff, you're not going to know what you're doing until week 3. So, we're going to all jump in together, and that's why we lean on each other. The piece I really like too is the retaught part. I think a lot of camp directors, including myself, struggle with keeping engagement with our returning staff members. And I could see myself, appointing 2 staff members with a leadership team member, saying, during this session, you're going to be helping onboarding the next group that's coming in that, come a little bit late because of graduation. It's going to be a lunch session. So please pay attention to this, this, and this. And then afterwards, as a team, you can discuss how you want to present it. I know that they will feel honored. I know that and of course, they're going to be paying attention even more, which is what we want. And for those that are, it also helps as a minor bridge between being a camp counselor and then becoming maybe a leadership team member. If you have these opportunities now, it's not such a jump, hopefully, when they become leadership team members. So I really, really love that.
Definitely.
I do have one little last one before I pass it off to Beth, but it really is about, any effective ways to train staff members who are maybe anxious or hesitant. And I know that has to do with community in some ways, like people feeling like it's okay to make mistakes in this community. We work really hard at camp to do that. But we are also inheriting staff members that are stressed out, that are part of cringe culture, perfectionism, and we need them to take that step. We need them to try,
Yeah.
especially in an environment that you're strongly suggesting, and I agree with, which is experiential, which is putting yourself out there, which is doing. So how do we help support those staff members in the try factor?
That is such an important topic that you brought up, Gabs, and I'm really glad you did. I always start staff training by telling my staff that you are all going to mess up this summer. I am going to mess up this summer. We are all going to mess up this summer. And what is important is how you deal with it and what you learn from it, and then how you move on. And then I always share an example of something that I did when I messed up. And I think it's really important that we not just like teach it, but that we model it. And I think there's a lot of camp directors, a lot of not even camp directors, anyone in a leadership role, that people are hesitant to do that because you want to come off as strong and confident and successful. And it's really hard to admit our own shortcomings and where we've messed up. But I think it's really important, so that they know that, it's not just, you're not just saying it, that you actually mean it. You're giving them a really specific example of something you did, and then you're explaining how you moved on and what you learned from it. And I think showing them that process is really, really helpful. So that's number one. I think it's really, really important. And then I would say throughout the week to call back to that, to even, have a session where we talk about, like, what is your biggest fear? What are you scared that you are going to mess up this summer? And then what would happen if you did that? Like, I do a lot of coaching as well. And whenever someone shares, a fear with me, I always say, and what's the worst case scenario? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen if that comes true? And then here are all the people around you and all the systems we have in place to make sure that if that does happen, we're going to be here to support you and we're going to help you fix it. And so if you are covering a tough topic, like a topic that you either can see in your participants, in your staff, that there is some like anxiety around that staff members look scared or uncomfortable or uncertain, I think it's really good to just like name it and to say, I know this topic is really heavy. Let's talk about what would happen if this went wrong. And then let's talk about how we would deal with it. And then also, I always think it's really important. And this is, I know we're going to come to best practices at the end of the episode, but one of my best practices is, check in with your staff throughout the week. And I don't expect the camp director can check in with every staff, but have your supervisors do it. Check in with staff, see how they're doing. Say to them, like, what stood out to you today? What was your biggest learning moment? Is there anything that scared you from what you learned today? Is there anything you're still unsure about? And I think that's when you can really identify, okay, this staff member is panicking a bit right now and may need some extra love and attention, may need some extra coaching, and that's fine. We think they can get there, but I think it's really good to just acknowledge that. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but address the elephant in the room, which is, this is a scary topic, and here's what would happen if you mess up, and here's how there's a safety net to support you.
I love that. And to say, what if it goes wrong? Like, what could happen that could go wrong? Because oftentimes we don't want to talk about that during staff training. We only want to talk about how to make it go right. And the other thing that I love, checking in with staff throughout training and just, what did you learn? Anything you're feeling uncomfortable about? I think it's also really important to front load that at the beginning of training, that you as the director will be asking these questions, or that other leadership team members will be asking these questions, so that they don't panic and say, oh my gosh, Gab just came and asked me what I'm not feeling confident about. I must not be doing a good job. But if they know this is something that is going to happen
100%.
already, then they're like, oh, it's my turn for Gab to ask me that question. But I think that's really great. Anything else you want to say, Gab, before I pass it over for the famous recap?
Oh gosh, I was just happy you were talking, because I am feverishly writing notes. Like, these are my notes. You can't see it, team, if you're not on YouTube, but basically I've got a lot. I'm ready. I'm ready for recap time. All right,
Go for
recap.
I'm excited.
Okay, team, listen. We covered more ground than I expected. Okay, and it is exciting stuff because the thing is that Shoshi is handing us a little guidebook, and there's just a couple of things that if you keep in mind and you connect with your staff and your leadership team and put this together, you're gonna have a great summer. So we're gonna start at the very, very, very beginning. Where do we start? Well, let's reflect back in last year and let's look at some of the must-haves. So we're not saying pendulum swinging here, but we're picking one or two must-have conversations or topics that we want to focus on throughout our whole staff training. And guess what? It could be anxious staff members. That could be one of the things that we're all trying to overcome together. But when you're looking at your beginning, you're also looking at the mission, you're looking at celebrating self and connecting to community. So if you're looking at your first 72 hours, start there. Now, when you're planning your entire session, your entire training, there are 4 categories that Beth helped us remember, which is 4 different categories for sessions. So we want interactive, we want peer-led, we want pure fun, and we would like lecture. And if you're kind of like me and want a little extra challenge, so she's saying, hey, why not just have one pure lecture a day? That is a great goal, team. If you get that down to there, let us know how you did that. Let us know how you experienced it. But it's a wonderful, wonderful goal. Now we're going to go back to the human, the person, that staff member. Beth and Shoshi both agree that staff are the most important people on camp, and that's because they care for our campers. And one of the things that she said was, we're looking at building memories and we're looking at building confidence. And we do that through shared experiences. That's why 3 out of the 4 categories are done with people. And this is all wrapped in the glorious thing that we get to do at camp, which is fun. If you're keeping fun as a focus and individuals in your heart, you're going to create an amazing summer and staff training experience. Thank you so much for joining us today. I had so much more to say, but Shoshi, we need to have you back on. This was fantastic.
I would love to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we'll get to that part afterwards when we're all done recording. Book something else. But if you would like to tell us any of your thoughts, either on this episode or any other, you can get in touch with us directly and we'll let you know how to do that. But you can let us know any topics you would like us to discuss, any guests that you recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips that you would like to share. We're all about sharing in this industry, so we would love to hear from you. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we would love it if you could leave us a rating or a review in your podcasting app. So here's how you can connect with us. So, Gab, where can they find you?
Listen, team, you can check out where I work at waro.com, and you can get in touch with me at info@waro.com. Waro is spelled Ouareau.
The Vowel Camp.
It is.
All right. And Shoshi, how can they reach you?
Yes, so you can find my website. It is workwithintent.ca. And you can also find me on Instagram at workwithintent. And my email address is srothschild, that's SROTHSCHILD at workwithintent.ca.
Perfect. Thank you. You can find out more about what I do at gocamp.pro or email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, or I'm on Threads at topaz_Faye. And for our next podcast, we'll be talking about the skill gap nobody talks about, teaching counselors how to notice things. All right. Before we sign off, we have our usual best practice. So, of course, we're going to use her brilliance one more time. So, Shoshi, could you give us one more tidbit of information, please?
Yes, sure. So my best practice when Beth and Gabz asked me to, they kind of gave me a heads up that I was going to be sharing a best practice. And this is the first thing that popped into my mind. I know a lot of camps survey their staff. They survey their staff after the end of the summer. I hope you are all surveying your staff at the end of staff training as well, but I would recommend not doing it on the last day, but doing it a day or 2 before it is over, because that gives you time to course correct. If there is something that you missed, if your staff don't feel confident, if they are scared, if they feel like they haven't learned something, there is only so much you can do with information if you receive it after the staff training period is over. And so I really recommend to try to get it out at least 24 hours before your staff training ends. so that you can use that information to course correct if necessary. But the other thing I'm going to add, if this is okay to kind of squeeze in a second best practice suggestion here,
Absolutely.
amazing, is that you should also be surveying your staff before staff training. Once they've signed their contract, send them a survey and ask them, what do you want to learn about? What are you anxious about this summer? What skills will be helpful for you? What are you hoping that we cover during staff training week? Not only is it going to help you design your staff training week and give you an inside look into the minds of your staff members to make sure you're touching on things that are important to them, but it's also going to show the staff that you value them and that you value their experience and that you are designing staff training based on their needs. And that says a lot about the culture, the staff culture at your camp. And it says a lot about whether or not this is a place that values staff and whether or not this is going to be a really wonderful place for staff to work. So if you want to show your staff that you care, survey them before staff training so that you can use that information to design a staff training week that really speaks to them and their needs.
And that is, it's such a great tool. We've been doing that for a while now. And when we are trying to move into a little bit more experiential, we did ask, how do people learn best? And we gave a list of great things.
That's amazing.
And of course, some of it was experiential, some of it was listening, but we were able to present those statistics to the rest of the group. And we also presented what stops you from trying in front of other people. And we presented that, and we were able to say 90% in the room, this is X. And so we're like, hey, team, together, 90% of us won't do this if. And it really shifted how people saw. A lot of times the staff think they're the only ones that are nervous to speak up. They're the only ones. When you see that 90% of other staff members struggle with that, and this is what they need from others to learn, it's a wonderful tool. So I love this best practice.
Well, Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. A very special thank you to Shoshi Rothschild for being here with us and sharing her advice, experience, and wisdom. We're so grateful to you. And to everyone else, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions or want us to dive deeper into any part of this, reach out. We're here to help you create the best staff training possible. So until next time, keep making camp a place where young people grow, not just campers, but the staff too. Thanks for listening, friends. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.